I just go? Yeah, cool. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee. We are being recorded and broadcast live, and this recording will be available on YouTube to watch in future as well. So with that in mind, when you speak, just make sure your microphone is on and you speak into it so that everybody in the room and online can hear clearly. Start with apologies for absence. We've got a few apologies today. We've got apologies from councillors Waters, Wilson, Knight, Mason, Smalley and Kilbane. Councillor Mason might join us later. Next on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does anybody in the committee have any interests to declare about anything on the agenda this evening? No? Okay. Then minutes. We've got two sets of minutes to approve. We'll do them one at a time. We'll start with the minutes from the 4th of November 2024. Does anybody have any amendments, or is everybody happy to approve those as an accurate record? I'm not seeing any hands up, seeing a few nods. We approve those as an accurate record. I'll sign. No, just the 4th of November. Yeah. They approved? Yep. Okay, great. Yes, we'll move on to the minutes of the 6th of February. Councillor Cuthbertson, did you have?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a formality to ask when we can expect to have a report from the Street Trading Policy Working Group. I
think for now we just need to look at it's just looking at the accuracy of the minutes and recording them as an accurate record. Any matters arising, I think maybe come back to later, if that's all right. I had one amendment to suggest in the minutes, which is on page 20. There's a paragraph that says, following a vote on the new recommendation to defer, 6 members voted in favour and 8 members voted in abstention. The motion fell. I think it's just a typo. It's supposed to say 8 members voted against. So it's just a typo, but it is a matter of accuracy. So yeah, so we'll make that amendment. And then does anybody have any other amendments or anything to that set of minutes? Yeah, Councillor Baxter.
There we go. Sorry about that. Sorry, I just noticed that in the minutes, it still has the typo Councillor Hook Baxter. Again, I don't know if we've got married again, Anne, but yeah. Sorry.
So we'll amend that to Baxter. Is that what was actually happened? So somebody check the record. Yeah, you've checked it. Okay, so we'll make that amendment as well. And then with those two amendments, is everyone happy to approve those minutes of the 6th of February as an accurate record? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So next on the agenda is public participation. We've got one person registered to speak today. Sorry, 1 second before we move on to that. Councillor Woodard.
It's just one question. When do you want the matters arising? So actions that were in here to be brought up, when do you want that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, in
council
committee meetings, we don't do matters arising, but we maybe could do it under agenda item 7, programme of work.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
it's just so that I know when to raise it.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Right, public participation. Flick Williams hopefully is joining us online. Can you hear us, Flick?
Yes, good afternoon.
Great, we can hear you clearly. So you've got up to 3 minutes. Feel free to start on your own time, and I'll give you a nudge if it looks like you're going over your allotted time.
I'll start by quoting what I said to this committee on 2nd of September last year. It is disappointing that there are still 3 vacant HCVs when we were originally assured that all 11 would be on the road by last March. I concur that it is inappropriate to conduct a further unmet demand survey before they are operational in order to take a snapshot of the situation under real market conditions. So I trust they will be licensed and deployed as soon as possible, certainly within the next 6 months, to enable the next survey to take place in February 2025. I believe we really cannot afford to delay it any longer, as it will give a picture of demand as it is affected by the cessation of the dial-a-ride service, which was still operational at the time of the last survey. Yet here we are in exactly the same situation 6 months on, a whole year after we were assured all new WAVs would be deployed. I maintain that unmet demand surveys done every 5 years or 2 per decade is insufficient. I'm interested in the question of how the formula that determines numbers of vehicles licensed to meet demand more generally is arrived at. How do we account for the significant expansion of the population anticipated by the rise in house building in the city, especially when so many of these properties are designed to be car-free? How will you persuade those with cars to give them up if taxis are not available when needed? To that end, and to bring some real lived experience to your deliberations on unmet demand, let me share my experience of Saturday, 7th of December. A veterinary emergency found me calling 5 taxi companies before I could get any taxi to take me across town to my vets. I knew it would be futile from the outset trying to get a WAV, but in an emergency as this was, I can mobilise without wheelchair, although it is painful and risky for me to do so. Ringing the same taxi company for the return journey, who had told me 20 minutes, after 45 I rang back to be told, we can't get anyone to come out to you, sorry. No other firm would take my booking. So I'm now stranded in a storm with my now euthanized beloved cat in a carrier precariously balanced on my rollator. I shuffled to the nearest bus stop and quite literally crawled onto a full bus an hour later, where I was subjected moments later to a disability hate incident. A man boarded the bus, saw me in a mask, laughed loudly, leaned over the top of my head and coughed repeatedly over me. The experience has left me anxious about being placed in a situation again where I'm unable to get a taxi urgently. Please let's get on with the unmet demand survey without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us and to share your personal experiences. We will consider what you've said and take that into account when we get to that agenda item later. Thank you, Flick Williams. So next on the agenda, are members happy to change the agenda item order slightly and do agenda item 6 and then agenda item 5? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, thank you. So in that case, we'll go straight to agenda item 6, which is the unmet demand survey. I will invite officers to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dave Cowley. I'm Taxi Licensing Manager. Further to the report that we submitted in October 2024, this report's now seeking members' approval to undertake an unmet demand survey in relation to the Hackney carriage provisions with the authority. Back in October, we still had 3 remaining outstanding Hackney carriage vehicle licenses. I'm pleased to inform members that they have now been allocated and we are literally waiting for vehicles to come on board to be licensed, and they will be on the streets within the next 3 months. So this report's seeking members' approval to undertake the survey. Whilst when we first went out for the allocation of the licenses, we were in a transition period between an update for the Department of Transport's best practice guidance. And now in that 2010 best practice guidance, the report suggests that councils undertake an unmet demand survey every 3 years. They updated that in November of 2023 with a recommendation of 5 years. We now have that set in our policy. But because we have gone through the process of these new 10 vehicles with the unmet demand survey, and they are now going to be on and ready within the next couple of months, officers are suggesting that we continue with the 2010 update of going out every 3 years, which means that it would have been due this year in February. So the options that we're providing members with in this report is to engage a transport consultant to undertake an unmet demand survey and bring the results to committee, and that's to do that immediately, or to wait another 2 years with the updated guidance to 2023 and do the same and bring the report to committee, or take no action at this time. That could leave the council at risk for legal challenge because we need to technically do that. Thank you.
Just one small point, when you say immediately, it's to book the survey in immediately, it's not to undertake it literally immediately, yeah.
Great. So the options, as have just been explained to us, are at the bottom of page 57 and top of page 158. Before we start debating any of those options or proposing anything, does anybody have any questions or anything they want clarified first? Oh, yeah, of course.
Just one point for members to note. When we did the last unmet demand survey and members of this committee recommended that we only released hackney carriage vehicle licences to wheelchair accessible electric vehicles, we had over 200 people on the hackney carriage waiting list at that time. We have gone through all 200 and however many of that people, and they have some of them have taken up the option of having a hackney carriage vehicle. Some of them, and majority of them, as you can probably gather, have refused and haven't wanted to take up. So it hasn't been for officers will of trying to get people to take up these vehicles. We've gone through absolutely everybody on the waiting list, and it's now people coming to us, new applicants coming to us and showing an interest in wanting a hackney carriage vehicle. So if it had been down to officers, we would have loved to all those vehicles to go within weeks of the decision members made, but we have put a lot, Dave has put a lot of work into releasing all those vehicles licenses. It's just there hasn't been the demand for them.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, do you have a question?
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll try to string a sentence together tonight. I didn't do a very good job last night, but I think it's just coming back to what the speaker said. I think it's just to clarify that the Unmet survey, which I think has just been indicated, the Unmet needs survey will take place after we've allocated the hackney carriage vehicle licenses, and I did have a second one, which is just to ask your comment on the point about the survey. The survey's taking place every 5 years, when we obviously were expecting quite a few developments to come forward in terms of house building and whatnot.
Yeah, we would engage the consultants from this report after this decision's made tonight. There would be a lead-in period, which is usually a couple of months for them to get proposals to us how they're going to undertake the report. By that time, we're expecting all vehicles to be on the road and licensed. And therefore, when the report is undertaken, the survey is undertaken, it will have the full number of vehicles in operation. The second bit is that there's a recommendation from DFT to undertake an unmet demand survey. If members feel that there is a change in any way, it can be recommended earlier. Yeah.
Councillor Avillius?
Thank you. Yeah, this is just a question about the methodology, which might not be appropriate for this report, but the methodology of the unmet demand survey. When you're looking at wheelchair accessible vehicles, would that survey look at whether you can book a wheelchair accessible vehicle a day ahead? Because I know that's one of the problems sometimes, that you might be able to get one if you ring right now, but sometimes operators are unwilling to book one a day ahead because they're not so confident about driver availability. And I think in terms of accessible vehicles, it would be really interesting to have an understanding, and that's particularly true around the school run times, because the wheelchair accessible vehicles are often used during the school run, so it's impossible to book one during the school run. And it'd be really useful to understand if it's possible to, and whether we need to be thinking about that demand when you're booking ahead.
Yeah, we can write that into the proposals for the unmet demand survey. We are working closely with a number of operators at the moment to ensure that the advanced bookings for accessible vehicles can be undertaken under their business models. There has been some significant good results from a number of individual companies, but we are working through the rest of the private hire companies now to see what their business models are like.
Thank you.
Councillor Widdowson?
Thank you. I think that we need to get on with it, looking at the different information and certainly hearing from the speaker. We need to get on with it. What I think will be really helpful, picking up on Councillor Ravilius's comment, is could you just share around the methodology before it's finalised? Just, you know, send it round as a Word document. We have a quick look through it, make sure that it's asking the types of questions that we'll ask later if we haven't asked them at the same time. Would that be possible? Because then we just get on with making the decision if you get on with it or not.
Yeah, we can get a proposal from the consultants and then provide that to committee.
Thank you, that would be helpful. I can't see any other hands for questions, so would anybody like to propose anything? Go ahead, Councillor Widdowson.
I propose we vote yes for option 1.
Great, would anybody like to second that?
Second.
Councillor Cuthbertson, okay. Anybody want to debate anything or propose anything differently? No debate at all? Okay, we'll take a vote on that then. Option 1 is to authorise officers to engage a transport consultancy to undertake the unmet demand survey. Once completed, the results of the survey, bring them to this committee for the issue to be considered further. And also before the survey starts, share with committee members the methodology. Okay, all those in favour of that? Okay, that's unanimous, so I won't ask for against or abstentions. Thank you very much, everybody. We will move on to agenda item 5, which is the Licensing Act 2003 Cumulative Impact Assessment and Statement of Licensing Policy. I'll start by inviting officers to introduce your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Leslie Cook, the Licensing Manager for the Council. In accordance with the requirements of the Licensing Act, this report seeks members' support for the formal review of the Council Statement of Licensing Policy and the implementation of the Cumulative Impact Assessment. It advises of the consultation undertaken and the amendments made. The report seeks a recommendation to Council that the revised policy and Cumulative Impact Assessment be adopted. And the recommendation before members today is that members approve option 1 and recommend to Council that the revised Statement of Licensing Policy and Cumulative Impact Assessment that can be found at Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the report be adopted. In April of last year, we formed a working group to go through the policy and the Cumulative Impact Assessment. Members of this committee were on this group along with some representatives of the responsible authorities under the Licensing Act. The Act requires that licensing authorities determine and publish a statement of licensing policy at least once every 5 years, and our current policy was approved in March 2022. A full review of this policy has taken place in line with the review of the Cumulative Impact Assessment, and the draft revised policy is Annex 1. The amendments made are highlighted in yellow, and the amendments made following the consultation are highlighted in turquoise. Now, I know that some members may have a black and white copy of the agenda before them, so if anybody wants me to go through what is the turquoise and what is the yellow, please just ask. As members know, York has a Cumulative Impact Assessment, and it's a requirement of the Act that that assessment is reviewed every 3 years. Our first assessment was published in March 2019, so this is the second time that that assessment has been reviewed. So the main reason that we've reviewed the licensing policy is because we've had to review the Cumulative Impact Assessment. By publishing the Cumulative Impact Assessment, the Council is setting down a strong statement of intent about its approach to considering application for the grant and variation of premises licenses and club premises certificates in the assessment area. It does not change the fundamental way that licensing decisions are made. Each application still has to be considered on its own merits. Within the draft reviewed Cumulative Impact Assessment, the area of the city centre that has been identified has not changed. We have, however, removed the red and amber zones that are in our current Cumulative Impact Assessment. basically because they were confusing people. People were under the opinion it's not in the red zone, so it must be fine, rather than the fact it was still in the cumulative impact assessment area. So we've removed the red and amber zones. The cumulative impact is covered in section 9 of the draft revised policy. The draft revised cumulative impact assessment can be found at Annex 2, and the evidence base that we got from North Yorkshire Police for the assessment can be found at Annex 3. A consultation did take place from the 5th of December to the 2nd of February on both the policy and the assessment. The list of consultees can be found at Annex 4. We received 5 responses to the consultation and they can be found at Annex 5. Consultation responses have been taken into consideration, and where required, the draft policy and cumulative impact assessment have been amended. Within the analysis in the report, I've given the history of our policies, our cumulative impact zone that we had before cumulative impact assessments came into force, and the cumulative impact assessment. I've also provided details of the current licences and certificates in force, and the table at paragraph 32 gives details of the number of applications received, licences suspended, lapsed and surrendered over the last 6 financial years. So the options before members of today are: recommend to council that the draft policy and cumulative impact assessment are adopted. That's option 1. And option 2, recommend to council that the draft policy and/or cumulative impact assessment is amended with alternative wording agreed by members. Since the report was published, the government has made the decision with regards to the Business and Planning Act, and the provisions within the Business and Planning Act that altered the Licensing Act are ending on the 31st of March. Therefore, within the policy document on page 79, we need to remove paragraphs 12.5 and 12.6. And on page 82, we need to remove the section that relates to the Business and Planning Act, if members agree to that those alterations when they're determining the options. Just so members are aware, in the current policy that we have in place, there was a restriction within that policy that said members of the licensing committee couldn't sit on subcommittee hearings if the application related to a premises within their ward. That has been removed. Members will, once the new policy is approved by council, members will be able to sit on subcommittee hearings for an application that is in their own ward, as long as, of course, there's not a conflict of interest, etc., in place. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So the options are on page 30, but again, before we get into proposing or debating any options, does anybody have any questions about the draft policy or the cumulative impact area? I'm going to say CIA from now on, so I don't have to say cumulative anymore. Councillor Avilius?
Thank you. It's a really excellent policy, and I'd like to thank the working group, and the additions that have been made really strengthen it, and there's some great things in there. But the question I wanted to ask was, we've seen the highest increase in antisocial behaviour on I think it was Piccadilly, but it isn't included in the cumulative impact area, is it? Or am I misunderstanding the map?
The part of Piccadilly from where the Parliament Street end of Piccadilly up to Merchant Gate is within the cumulative impact area, and that's the area where it's got the high concentration of issues.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Widdowson?
Mine's more mundane than that one. So on page 70, you've got a whole section on waste. The extended producer's responsibility has changed all the different ways that waste is being collected from commercial premises. So specifically, you have to remove food waste separately, different things being, you know, it'll be in Act in April, I think it is, onwards. And I know that the commercial guys are talking to restaurants, late night people. Can we do anything in there that actually strengthens our position on how waste is presented within the city centre? If you walk around, and I know that we've got shift patterns and that we cover lots of the city centre in terms of removing stuff from litter bins, but if you walk around our city centre, which relies a lot on tourism, is certainly when the weather's warm enough, which it ain't today, you will find families sat outside with rubbish bags behind them or with big bins to one side of them. Is there anything that we can do in here to actually try and strengthen our position and turn the city into a cleaner and greener place to have a good time in for residents and for tourists?
I don't know if you've got a colour or black and white section. That's the waste section is actually a new section that we've added into the policy this time. This policy is sort of making recommendations to people. I wasn't the manager of the neighbourhood enforcement team was on the working group, and they deal with any commercial waste issues under, I don't know what legislation it's dealt with, but under their relevant legislation. But I don't, as a committee, I don't think we'd be able to take a licence off somebody or refuse an application because they're not dealing with their waste correctly.
You can in Westminster. Okay, so in Westminster, the rule, they've introduced different rules and you can. There's various different bylaws that they introduced over 10 years ago. So there are mechanisms, and I think I didn't know it was added in because I've got a black and white copy. So apologies for that. Yeah. Right, so apologies. But I genuinely think this is an opportunity to strengthen our hand. If you talk to the environmental health guys that go round, whatever fly tipping it is in town, you will find that their opportunity to prosecute and their opportunity to actually change people's behaviour is minimal. If you talk to I'm told that I'm not allowed to name different councillors now, which is a new one that I didn't realise, but if you talk to the people that are head of that area, the gentleman that runs the city centre, you will find that if we can strengthen this and strengthen his hand in it, we can make the city much more pleasant for residents and for tourists and actually make their job easier. I don't know if it's doable. I'm more than happy with the rest of the sections, but that bit, I think we're missing an opportunity to strengthen our hand.
What I will do is I will speak to the manager of the neighbourhood enforcement officers, see what the situation is, what is coming in, and I'm just not 100% sure how it would fit in with the licensing objectives. But because I mean, we've strengthened within the policy under some of the licensing objectives, making it stronger about people having litter bins, sweeping the area outside of their premises. But I'm not quite sure how it would fit in with the licensing objectives, but I don't know what this new piece of legislation is. And I'm not aware of any bylaws we have in the city with regards to.
We don't have any bylaws.
Yeah.
All I was suggesting is that different parts of the country do have different bylaws, and a good one to look at is Westminster.
Chair, if it says, sorry, because Leslie was looking at me, I think to perhaps come in and say something about, I think Councillor Woodson, yes, I think maybe what you're suggesting is that Westminster deal with this by way of bylaws and perhaps not through the licensing policy. So that's whether the council consider bylaws, I don't know, but whether it can be dealt with through the licensing policy, I share Leslie's concerns that this has probably gone as far as you can in this policy. given the constraints of the licensing regime and the licensing objectives, and the fact that waste is dealt with by other legislation as well.
So there's no firm solution there on what to do about that, but yeah, of course, yeah.
I've got no problems then with the rest of it, but I do think, and I would like it noted, that I really think we're missing an opportunity to strengthen our hand.
I don't think there'd be an issue, as we have done in other areas of the policy, and if members agree, not that I'm telling you to agree to option 2, but if members agree to option 2 with some slightly alternative wording, that I can maybe agree with the chair and vice chair after this meeting. If once I've spoken to the neighbourhood enforcement manager and got the legislation, we can put in that licence holders should be aware of this piece of legislation and include the link.
That would be fantastic. And also, you know, in my head, it's a public nuisance when it's not dealt with. Sorry. Sorry. It really is. But if you look at certain times, and I know our guys work really, really hard to keep the city centre clean and beautiful for our 9 million visitors and our 210,000 residents. If there's anything we can do to make the experience even better.
Yeah,
and if there's any way this policy could help, I would be really grateful.
Yeah, throughout the policy, we've linked other pieces of legislation that people should be aware of. So including a link that, you know, letting licensed premises know that they should be aware of this. I've got no issues with if that's what members would like.
And do you think it'd be possible to do that before the publication deadline to get this through full council later this month? It's quite a tight turnaround.
Well, I can email the manager of neighbourhood enforcement tomorrow and get that information and hopefully get that turned around relatively quickly.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hook? Yeah, we'll go to Councillor, on the list, I've got Councillor Hook and then Councillor Cuthbertson and then Councillor Aurelius. And I think that, I'm pretty sure that's the order people put their hand up in, but it's not too long to wait. That's not too many hands.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that it could be a public nuisance, partly because of the smell, but also when people are intoxicated, they might think it's enormous fun to kick bags around and split them up and things like that. So if they're well out the way of anyone who's been drinking, that would be really good.
Councillor Cuthbertson?
Thank you, Chair. That was exactly the point I was going to raise.
Councillor Aurelius?
Thank you. Just to say, I've just looked up the Westminster one, and obviously I've only skimmed it, but from what I can see, the paragraphs in here are very similar to the paragraphs we have in here in this report. So I'm comfortable with looking at if there's anything more that could be done, but I think possibly Westminster are doing it via other means, as our officers have advised us. So, yeah.
Councillor Nichols?
Yeah, it might just be my lack of understanding of the wording, but on line 48, it says applicants are encouraged to engage in national local schemes. And then on 49, they're encouraged to make staff aware and train them. Their consideration should be given to arrangements. But if you're applying, you can quite easily say, well, I've considered that and thought of that. So there doesn't appear to be much they have to do. But then we've all been talking about rubbish. It's the law that rubbish is looked after, rather than it's the law that people got to get home safe. So is it what can we do against a licensee who doesn't consider, and how do they prove they did or didn't consider getting their staff home? But on page 49, the bottom of page 49, you've got consideration should be given to getting staff home. So a licensee can say, well, yeah, I did consider it, but I decided not to send them home. Yet if it's rubbish, they're legally required to take care of the rubbish, which seems legally you take care of rubbish, but your staff, well, I thought about it, but I decided not. And can we strengthen that at all to say, actually, consideration is an easy thing, isn't it, if you're a bad licensee? And, you know, it just seems that the language on things that are really important, getting involved in national schemes, helping the staff and their training, can you think about it? But if it's a bag of rubbish, we're really going to be on you. Are your hands tied in what you can say in terms of those things?
They are, I'm afraid, yes. Again, paragraph H on 4.19, that's a new paragraph that's been added.
Yeah.
We can't make any licensed premises have arrangements in place to get their staff home safely. You know, and one of the things that the licensing policy can do for a new applicant and our existing trade, it's something that they should be taken into consideration and looking at. But it's a very, very useful tool if a review application is before members and somebody is saying, well, there's no evidence that you've trained your staff. So how do your staff know how to not serve to underage or to drunks or to identify vulnerability, etc. That's when the policy is a very useful tool.
Any other questions? I think I had one, it was a question I asked earlier and I'm really sorry, I can't remember what the answer was, about on page 77, paragraph 11.6, whether the gendered language, him or her, is a legal requirement or whether if we choose to, we can amend that to them.
Yes, Chair, we can change that to them. Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that, yes.
And then I had another question, what was it? Page 49, paragraph 4.19 says all hate crime incidents are reviewed by the police. I was wondering whether that is accurate or whether it should be all reported hate crime incidents are reviewed by the police or words to that effect.
Yeah, the police will only deal with anything that is reported to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be aware of the crime. So yeah, it's just the ones that are reported to them.
Thank you. Councillor Hook?
I might have missed it because it's a long report and you did. But they were saying that some of the problems are now coming in because people have got apps at their tables so that the staff can't tell whether someone's been drinking too much and refused to drink and various other things like that. Is there something in here to sort of try and curtail that? I'm hoping there is, but...
There is under the section of local factors, page 52 of the report, I have covered that. I can't remember which paragraph it is, but I have covered that because we have seen lots and lots of premises are now using apps, or you go to a table and you scan a QR code, or there's people walking around with the shots. So I have covered that. I can't remember which paragraph it is now.
That's more a general background thing rather than saying, can you try not to do it or pay extra attention when that's happening or something?
Yeah, it mentions that the problem exists, but not how to address it. Yeah.
Again, it's something we can't stop premises doing. So they can legally do that, but then they've got to make sure they're not selling alcohol to drunks. It's all about having the staff training in place.
Was there an amendment? Did you have some wording in mind?
It would just be nice to say, well, if it is covered by staff training already, but it's just to enforce that people have got to be aware that when people are using these apps, when you're actually bringing the drinks to the table, perhaps consider whether they should be having them. And I don't know, but just to address that so that it's more secure.
Under section 4.19 on page 49, make sure make sure staff are trained to identify and report issues, etc. We could put an additional bullet point under there with regards to apps and QR codes, if you wish, and again, agree the wording with Chair and Vice Chair.
I think it actually, I've just seen it is also mentioned in paragraph 5.23 on page 57. Says pubs, bars and restaurants that encourage customers to scan a QR code or download an app to make their order and provide table service must also have these measures in place. Yeah. Does that paragraph 5.23 cover it enough, do you think? Give everyone a second to read it.
Sorry, Chair, that's to do with more off sales and home deliveries. Oh, yes, it does. Sorry, I only read the bottom of that page. I didn't go over to the next page. So yes, it is covered. I've added that much, and there's been that much input from other people. You forget what's been included.
Has everyone had a minute to read paragraph 5.23 and is happy that that covers it? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Villiers.
Sorry, I was just going to exactly direct us to that
Oh,
paragraph.
it's already
I don't
spotted it.
know if it might be worth just strengthening the last sentence saying to make, order and provide table service must also have these measures in place and have trained their staff to recognise. If there's anything that could be added to just strengthen around the staff training, recognising when people are ordering from the table via an app. I'm not sure how much weight that would carry any.
I mean, I've made a list of all the kind of amendments that have been suggested so far. So when we come to proposing things, we'll come back to that idea. Yeah. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I have the report's quite long, so apologies if I've missed this somewhere. But in this sort of paragraph, I don't know whether it's worth mentioning the government's new legislation that you'll be able to have your ID on your phone rather than physical ID. Obviously, that's come in fairly recently. I don't know the timeline of when it will come into place, but I don't know whether it's worth mentioning it in that paragraph. 5.23, the one that we were just talking about.
It's a statutory requirement. It's a mandatory licence condition on any premises that sells alcohol, that the premises must have an age verification policy in place. And on page 65, we recommend that is the challenge 25. However, we don't stipulate within the policy what ID should be checked, but that is something that for members who have been on subcommittee hearings, if the police have mediated a condition, they usually stipulate what ID is acceptable, and we are aware that the new ID is coming into play at some point with regards to it being on your phone.
Can't see any other questions, so I'll just quickly remind everyone what sort of possible potential amendments have already been discussed now, in case anybody wants to formally propose them. So we had deleting paragraphs 12.5 and 12.6 and all of section 14, because that all relates to legislation that's no longer in place. We had removing the gendered language from paragraph 11.6, just replacing him or her with them. We had a suggestion to add a word, like potentially add the word reported to paragraph 4.9 19 to make it clear that it's reported hate crimes that are investigated, and maybe adding an extra sentence to paragraph 5.23 about the use of QR codes. So those are the amendments that have been suggested so far. Would anybody like to propose either option 1 or option 2? And if anyone wants to propose option 2, think about what amendments to propose. Councillor Widdowson?
I thought we were going to have a conversation as well about the waste area.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if
Right,
you'd like,
okay.
yeah.
So I'm assuming that Leslie will go away and talk to the relevant people and put the right words in, and that'll be agreed through the chair and the vice chair. Yeah.
Would you like to formally propose option 2 with that?
Okay.
And or anything else? Or
was there anything else that we'd all chipped in on?
I mean, do you agree with all the ones that
Yeah, they're
have
fine.
already been suggested so far? Happy to propose all of those?
So I'm happy
plus the
to
thing about
propose
waste?
that, including that the waste is looked at.
Okay, great, thank you. Would anybody like to second that or propose anything else? Councillor Hook? Seconding that? Yeah, okay, great. Would anybody like to?
Sorry, Chair, can I just mention that, of course, because this policy has already been out to public consultation, I think the officers just need to advise whether, whether these amendments individually, cumulatively, are such that a further public consultation is warranted, or whether they think they're not significantly material and just.
Yeah, I would say that we're adding an odd word here and a few words there. I don't think we're not adding a new section or a major new paragraph.
Or any new obligations on
No.
licence holders that they
No.
might want to be consulted on.
No, we won't need to consult again on that.
So would anybody like to propose anything else or debate any of that? No, okay. Well, I think that's a sign of all the work that's gone into it. We had a cross-party working group on this, so I think that's a sign that everybody maybe has already had the opportunity to have input, because as Leslie said, there's a lot has been added to this. It's a very different policy to what we started with, isn't it? A lot has been added about environment, waste, single-use plastic, disposable cups, that sort of thing. A lot has been added about sexual violence, hate crime, spiking, domestic abuse, things from the Get Me Home Safely campaign, because we had a motion passed through full council, so that's been added. Information about health impacts of alcohol has been added. Some policy about pricing of non-alcoholic alternatives. Some information about accessibility and neurodiversity, and reminding employers of their minimum wage obligations. So I'm very happy with the policy. I'm happy to support option 2 as has been proposed and seconded. Does anybody have anything to add before we take a vote? No? Okay, so is everyone clear on what we're voting on, or should I read all that out again? Is everybody? Yeah, everybody's comfortable with going straight to the vote. Okay, great. So all those in favour of what has been proposed? And again, that's unanimous, so I won't ask for against or abstentions. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, thank you, everybody who worked on the policy, officers who are here and officers who aren't here, and members from all parties who took part in that. Thank you. Next on the agenda is agenda item 7, programme of work. So sometimes we have this on the agenda just to give us an idea of what sort of things are coming up in future committee meetings. We haven't really got anything allocated to any meetings coming up. It's something where we can't, it's not like scrutiny committee where we plan what we want to work on as a committee and plan our work for the year ahead to plan it out. It's just here to give members an idea of what sort of things coming up, just for transparency, really. So there's nothing included in the papers on this agenda item, just because nothing's been allocated to any committee meetings yet. Depends what applications come forward for us to determine and that sort of thing. And does anybody have anything on this agenda item? No? Okay. And the final thing on the agenda is urgent business. There isn't any urgent business, so.
Yeah, it was the only bit was the matters arising on that section.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah. Would you like to bring that up now?
Absolutely.
Great.
So I've got a message from Ashley, and did send his sincere apologies because he's been caught in Ripon. What he's looking for is, when last time we had a debate, it was all about the street licensing. So what I think we need to see as a committee is, what is the scope and the feel and the look of that working group now? Because from our debate, the remit changed significantly. And I just wonder if different people across the council, different councillors, would now wish to be involved in that committee, that working group, sorry. So what is the progress on that? I know that he's spoken to you about it, but he's unclear as to what the answers were.
Well, Councillor Mason is on the working group himself. The working group's had one meeting so far, which was just kind of the first meeting we all got together. There isn't really an update since the last meeting that we had of this committee a month ago. Hopefully members of the working group are off working on their ideas and their research, but we haven't had a meeting since then, so there isn't really an update. I think we're hoping to have a meeting later this month, aren't we, of the working group, and then after that maybe we'll have a better idea of what we want to work on and what the scope of it is. But still, if any members of the committee would like to be on that working group, you're very, very welcome. It'd be great to have as much input and ideas from as many people as possible. Did you want to add something?
No, just I've asked the members of the working group for their availability for some dates later in March. I've shared with members of the working group. I've not got a lot of skills in doing maps, but them mapped out the locations of all of our city centre sites and shared the trading units that trade in those locations across the city. So members are aware, and we're just waiting for the next meeting.
Okay, so can we ask, as a committee, can we ask that when that meeting's happened, if we could just get an update as to what the timings are, what the scope is, and at that point people know whether or not there's the interest to actually, or the experience usually, to get involved. Is that okay? So can we have that, or when is our next meeting? Or if there's no work, we're not having a meeting?
Well, I mean, it depends what applications we get, don't we? We don't know when we might have a licence application and have to determine it.
That's extremely fair. So can I change the question then? Can we put a timeline on when we could be sent an update rather than the next meeting? Is that possible?
I think that can be a point discussed at the next working group of when everybody's happy with something coming before members, again as an update report. Yeah.
Can't see any other hands, so there's no urgent business, so I think that's everything for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have a good evening.